Part 1. The Ancient Mystery. The glass doors of the Galactic Archives opened with a soft hiss. Ambassador Do-Yeon Kim walked through them, her black heels clicking on the polished marble floor. Behind her, trying hard not to touch anything, walked her 12-year-old son Ji-ho. The boy's eyes were wide as he looked around the massive building. Everything here was so different from Earth. The ceiling stretched up so high that Ji-ho couldn't see the top. Strange lights floated in the air without any wires holding them. Alien beings moved through the hallways, some walking on legs, others floating, and a few that seemed to slide along the floor like living puddles. Ji-ho had seen aliens before, but never this many different kinds in one place. A tall creature approached them. It looked like a giant beetle standing on its back legs, with shiny blue armor covering its body. 6 arms extended from its sides, and its head had too many eyes to count quickly. When it spoke, a small device on its chest turned the clicking sounds into words Ji-ho could understand. "Welcome, Ambassador Kim. I am Dr. Thauraxis, the chief curator of this facility. We are honored by your visit." The alien bowed slightly, which looked strange with so many arms. Do-Yeon smiled and bowed back. "Thank you for having us, Dr. Thauraxis. This is my son, Ji-ho. I hope you don't mind that I brought him along." Thauraxis looked down at the boy. "Not at all. Young minds are always welcome here. Perhaps he will find our collections interesting." They started walking through the archives. Thauraxis explained that this building held the greatest mysteries from 17 different alien civilizations. Some of the puzzles and problems stored here were thousands of years old. Scientists from across the galaxy came here to study them, hoping to find solutions that had escaped everyone else. Ji-ho listened carefully as they walked. He noticed that many of the rooms they passed had thick windows, and inside each room, aliens sat at desks covered with glowing screens and floating displays. They all looked very serious, very focused on whatever they were working on. "How many puzzles are here?" Ji-ho asked. "Currently, we house 473 major enigmas," Thauraxis replied. "Though many are linked to each other, so solving one might help solve others. Has anyone solved any of them?" "Oh yes, young one. We solve perhaps 1 or 2 each decade. Just last year, Professor Velkara cracked the harmonic equations of the 3rd dynasty. That was a major breakthrough. 1 or 2 every 10 years? Ji-ho thought that seemed very slow, but he didn't say anything. Maybe these puzzles were really hard. They took an elevator that moved sideways as much as it moved up. Ji-ho's stomach felt weird during the ride, but he tried not to show it. His mother had told him to be polite and respectful. This was an important visit for Earth's relationship with the Galactic Council. The elevator opened into a new hallway. This one was quieter, with fewer aliens walking around. The walls here were made of something that looked like white crystal. Soft blue light came from somewhere Ji-ho couldn't identify. "We are now in the restricted section," Thauraxis said. "Only scholars with special permission can enter here. The mysteries in this section are considered the most important and the most difficult." They stopped at a large door marked with symbols Ji-ho couldn't read. Thauraxis placed one of his hands on a panel, and the door slid open silently. Cool air rushed out, making Ji-ho shiver slightly. The room beyond was huge. The ceiling here was even higher than the entrance hall. In the center of the room, floating in the air, was something that made Ji-ho stop and stare. It looked like a 3-dimensional grid made of light. Symbols floated inside it, glowing in different colors. As Ji-ho watched, the entire thing slowly rotated. But it wasn't rotating like a normal object would. Parts of it seemed to turn in directions that shouldn't exist. Looking at it too long made his eyes hurt a little around the room. At least 30 different aliens sat at workstations. Each one had multiple screens floating in front of them, showing different views of the glowing grid. Some were typing on keyboards that had way too many keys. Others seemed to control their screens just by moving their hands in the air. "This is the infinite tessellation," Thauraxis said quietly, like they were in a library. "It is perhaps the greatest mystery in the known galaxy?" Do-Yeon and Ji-ho both stared at the floating puzzle. It was beautiful in a strange way. The symbols inside kept changing positions, and the colors shifted through different patterns. Sometimes the whole thing would flash and new symbols would appear while others vanished. Who made it? Do-yeon asked. An ancient race called the Krivalium. They disappeared from the galaxy almost 8,000 years ago. Before they left, they created 7 great works. The tessellation was meant to be the ultimate test of intelligence. They said that whoever solved it would gain access to all their knowledge. And no one has solved it? Jiho moved closer to the window that separated the observation area from the puzzle chamber. No one, Thalraxis confirmed. We have been working on it for 743 years. The best mathematicians from every known species have tried. Our most powerful computers have been calculating possibilities for decades. Nothing has worked. Jiho pressed his hands against the window, looking at the spinning symbols. What makes it so hard? Thalraxis moved to stand beside him. The puzzle exists in 12 dimensions at the same time. That means it has 12 different directions instead of the 3 you're used to. Each symbol must follow certain rules, and those rules apply across all 12 dimensions at once. The number of possible combinations is larger than the number of atoms in this entire galaxy. Wow, Jiho said softly. Indeed. Many of our finest minds have spent their entire careers studying just small sections of it. Some have gone mad from the attempt. The complexity is beyond what most brains can handle. Do-yeon put her hand on her son's shoulder. It's impressive, isn't it? This is why the Galactic Archives are so important. They preserve these challenges for future generations. Can I see the rules? Jiho asked suddenly. Thalraxis' many eyes blinked in sequence. The rules? Well, I suppose there's no harm in it. Though I must warn you, understanding the rules alone takes most beings several years of study. I'd still like to see them, please. The alien curator gestured to an empty workstation near the window. Very well, young one. Let me bring up the basic framework for you. Jiho sat down in a chair that adjusted itself to fit his human size. A screen materialized in the air in front of him, showing symbols and diagrams. Thalraxis touched a few controls, and the display changed to show what looked like a very complicated instruction manual, while Thalraxis began explaining the basics to Jiho. Do-yeon stepped away to look at some of the other displays around the room. She could see star charts and mathematical equations that made no sense to her. The aliens working here barely looked up from their screens. They were completely absorbed in their work. Jiho, meanwhile, was staring at the screen with intense focus. His mother knew that look. It was the same expression he got when he was working on his puzzle books at home, the ones he'd spend hours on without taking a break. She smiled to herself. Her son had always loved puzzles ever since he was little. Logic games, riddles, pattern matching, anything that challenged his brain. The primary constraint, Thalraxis was saying, is that no symbol can repeat within any single-dimensional plane. Additionally, certain symbols have relationships with others. For example, if symbol alpha appears in position X, then symbol beta cannot appear in any adjacent position across any dimension. Jiho nodded slowly, his eyes scanning the information on the screen. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he tilted his head to one side, the way he always did when he was thinking hard about something. This looks like Sudoku, he said. Part 2, a different way of thinking. The room went quiet. Every alien in the chamber turned to look at the human boy sitting at the workstation. Some had stopped typing. Others had paused in the middle of moving their hands across their floating screens. Even the soft humming of the computers seemed to fade into the background. Dr. Thalraxis' translator made a strange stuttering sound, as if it couldn't quite process what Jiho had said. The alien curator bent down closer to the boy, several of his eyes focusing on Jiho's face. Sudoku? Thalraxis repeated the unfamiliar word slowly. I do not understand this reference. Jiho looked up from the screen, not realizing that everyone was now watching him. It's a puzzle game from Earth. You have a grid with 9 rows and 9 columns, and you have to fill in numbers from 1 to 9. The trick is that you can't repeat any number in the same row, column, or box. This puzzle here, it works the same way. It's just bigger and has more rules. A ripple of movement went through the room. One alien, who looked like she was made of living crystal, floated over from her workstation. Her body pulsed with different colored lights as she moved. "Young human," she said, her voice sounding like wind chimes. "Are you suggesting that the infinite tessellation is similar to a children's game?" "Well, not exactly the same," Jiho said, turning back to the screen. "This one is way more complicated. It has 12 dimensions instead of 2, and there are color relationships and these symbol dependencies. But the basic idea is the same. You eliminate the impossible options until you find the right answers." Ambassador Do-Yun walked back over to her son, a mix of pride and worry on her face. She knew Jiho was smart, but she hoped he wasn't accidentally insulting these important alien scientists. "Jiho," she said gently, "maybe we should let the experts work." "No, no," said the crystalline alien. Her lights were pulsing faster now, cycling through blues and purples. "Let the child continue. I am Professor Valcara, head of the Mathematical Research Division. Please, young one, explain what you see." Jiho shrugged. "Okay, so in Sudoku you start by looking for the easy clues. Like if a row already has the numbers 1 through 8, the last space has to be 9. You don't need a computer for that. You just use logic." He pointed at one section of the floating puzzle. "See that part there? That dimensional plane already has 11 of the 12 symbols. So that last space can only be one symbol. It has to be the one that's missing." Professor Valcara moved closer to the window, her entire body now glowing bright white. "By the ancients, he's right. Position Gamma 7 Delta. We've been including it in our calculations as a variable, but it's already determined by the existing constraints." Other aliens were starting to pay attention now. One creature that looked like a three-headed reptile slithered over to his own workstation and started checking Jiho's observation. "The human child is correct," the reptile said, his 3 mouths speaking in harmony. "This position has been locked in place since the beginning. We simply never noticed because we were focused on the higher dimensional interactions." Thalraxis made a clicking sound that the translator didn't bother to convert. "But how did you see that so quickly?" "We have been analyzing this puzzle for decades." Jiho turned in his chair to face the alien curator. "Because you're looking at it like it's really complicated. And it is complicated, but you have to start with the simple stuff first. In Sudoku, if you try to guess the hard squares first, you'll get stuck. You have to find the ones you're sure about, fill those in, and then use those answers to figure out the next easy ones. Sequential elimination based on certainty levels," Valcara said, her lights now a steady golden color. "We've been attempting to solve multiple sections simultaneously, using probability matrices and quantum calculations. But this approach, this starting with absolute certainties and building outward, it's so much simpler." A door at the far end of the chamber opened and more aliens began filing in. Word was spreading that something interesting was happening. Within minutes, at least 50 beings crowded into the observation area, all trying to get a look at the human boy and the puzzle. Jiho didn't notice the crowd. He was focused on the screen in front of him, his finger tracing invisible patterns in the air as he studied the symbols. "And here," he said, pointing to another section, "these color relationships. The rules say that blue symbols can't be adjacent to red symbols in any dimension, right?" "Correct," Thalraxis confirmed. "So this whole cluster here in the middle, it's locked into one of 3 possible patterns. Because if you put blue in this spot, then Reed has to go in these 5 spots to satisfy the other rules. But if you put red in this spot instead, then blue has to go in these other spots. And the third option is if you use green in this position, which changes everything else around it." Dr. Rickstone, the 3-headed reptile, was frantically making notes on his display. He's identified a constraint cascade that we missed entirely. By recognizing these 3 archetypal configurations, we can eliminate thousands of computational branches. "How do you see these patterns so easily?" Valcara asked. There was no annoyance in her voice, only genuine curiosity. Jiho thought about it for a moment. "I guess it's just practice. My teacher, Ms. Hygiene, she gives us logic puzzles every week in class. And my friend Minho and I, we race to finish puzzle books on the train. After you do enough of them, you start to recognize the patterns. Like, you know how certain setups always lead to certain solutions? You do these puzzles for entertainment? Asked an alien that looked like a floating jellyfish. Recreationally? Yeah, they're fun. There are stores on Earth that sell books with hundreds of puzzles in them. Different difficulty levels, too. Some are really easy. You can finish them in a few minutes. Others take hours. The aliens looked at each other. Several were making gestures that probably meant they were very surprised. Thoraxes spoke up. On most of our worlds, this type of abstract pattern recognition is considered advanced academic work. We don't typically introduce such concepts until individuals reach their third developmental phase. How old is that? Jiho asked. For my species, approximately 25 of your Earth years. Oh, Jiho didn't know what to say to that. 25 seemed really old to start learning about puzzles. Well, on Earth, we start pretty young. I've been doing simple logic puzzles since I was like 6 or 7. Ambassador Doyan watched as more and more aliens gathered around. She caught sight of several of them recording the conversation on their devices. This was turning into something much bigger than she'd expected. She made a mental note to contact the diplomatic office on Earth. They'd want to know about this. Professor Velkara gestured to the empty workstation. Next to Jiho, young one. Would you be willing to continue sharing your observations? I believe your perspective could be extremely valuable to our research. Jiho looked at his mother, who gave him an encouraging nod. Sure, he said. But I have to meet my Aunt Yunji for dinner at 6. She's visiting the station and she gets mad if I'm late. Several of the aliens made sounds that the translator interpreted as laughter. We will make sure you don't miss your dinner, Velkara promised. Now please tell us more about how you would approach this puzzle. What would you do next? Jiho turned back to the screen, his eyes scanning the complex display of symbols and dimensions. Well, after you find all the easy spots, you start looking for patterns. Like in regular Sudoku, sometimes you can't fill in a number yet, but you can figure out that it has to be in one of 2 or 3 places. Then later, when you fill in other numbers, you come back and those spots become obvious. He pointed to different sections of the tessellation as he talked. So here I can't tell exactly which symbol goes in this position. But because of the blue and red rule, and because of what's already in these other dimensions, I know it has to be either symbol or that symbol. Nothing else is possible? Dr. Rickstone was nodding with all 3 of his heads. Binary reduction. By limiting the possibilities, we reduce the computational complexity exponentially. I guess so, Jiho said. I just think of it as crossing out the wrong answers. For the next hour, Jiho walked the assembled scientists through his way of thinking. He didn't use fancy mathematical terms. He talked about elimination, about patterns, about the way certain setups always work the same way. He compared parts of the tessellation to tic-tac-toe, to chess puzzles, to riddles his grandfather had taught him, and the aliens listened. These beings, some of whom had lived for centuries and held multiple advanced degrees, took notes on the observations of a 12-year-old human child, because sometimes the most complicated problems needed the simplest solutions. And sometimes someone who didn't know it was supposed to be impossible could see things that everyone else had missed. Part 3. Working together the next morning, Jiho walked into the Galactic Archives like he owned the place. He didn't, of course, but after yesterday's session, Dr. Thauraxis had sent a message to Ambassador Doyan. The message was polite but clear. They wanted Jiho to come back. They wanted him to work with their research team. Doyan had discussed it with her son over breakfast. You don't have to do this, she'd said. I know you're on vacation from school. You should be having fun, not working on alien puzzles. Jiho had looked at her like she was crazy. Mom, this is fun. This is the coolest thing that's ever happened to me. So here he was, riding the sideways elevator up to Chamber 7 again. This time he came prepared. He had his backpack with his tablet, his favorite pencil, and a notebook. He also had 3 granola bars because alien food was weird, and he wasn't sure when lunch would be. The door to the chamber slid open. Jiho stopped in surprise. Yesterday, there had been about 30 aliens working in the room. Today there had to be at least 100. Every workstation was occupied. Some aliens were even sitting on the floor with portable screens. They all looked up when he entered. Professor Valkara floated over, her crystalline body glowing a warm orange color. "Good morning, Jiho. Thank you for coming back. As you can see, word of your insights has spread. Many researchers from other departments have requested permission to participate in this renewed effort." Oh, Jiho said. "That's a lot of people." "Indeed. We've organized teams based on your suggested approach. Team Alpha is working on identifying all the certain positions. Team Beta is mapping the constraint cascades. Team Gamma is analyzing the color and symbol relationships. And you, if you're willing, would work with me and Dr. Thalraxis on overall coordination." Jiho nodded. That made sense. In group projects at school, someone had to keep track of what everyone else was doing. "Okay, where do I sit?" They set him up at a workstation in the center of the room, with a view of the floating tessellation. Valkara explained that they'd spent the entire night reorganizing their approach based on what Jiho had shown them yesterday. Instead of running complex simulations, they were now doing what he'd suggested, starting with the easy parts. Building up from certainty. Dr. Rick's tone slithered over, his three heads looking excited. "Young Jiho, my team has already identified 47 positions that are completely determined by existing constraints. 47 positions that we previously thought were variable. Your method is revealing hidden structure we never knew existed." "That's good," Jiho said, pulling out his notebook. He liked to write things down by hand sometimes. It helped him think. "Can you show me which ones?" For the next several hours, Jiho worked with the alien scientists. It was strange, being the one that everyone kept asking for advice. At school, he was just a regular kid. Pretty smart, sure, but not special. Here, these incredibly advanced beings treated him like he was important. What surprised him most was how different their thinking was from his. When he looked at the puzzle, he saw patterns and shortcuts. He saw ways to eliminate wrong answers quickly. The aliens, though, they wanted to understand everything perfectly before they made any moves. They wanted mathematical proofs and computational verification for every single step. "But you're making it too complicated," Jiho said during one discussion with Team Beta. "Look, this section here. You don't need to calculate all the probability distributions. Just look at what's already there. This symbol can't go in any of these spots because they all break the adjacency rules. So it has to go in one of these 3 spots. Simple." A slug-like alien named Verse spoke up. "But what if we're wrong? What if there's an interaction we haven't considered?" "Then we'll figure it out later," Jiho said. "In Sudoku, sometimes you have to make your best guess and keep going. If it's wrong, you'll hit a dead end eventually, and then you come back and try something different. But if you spend forever trying to be completely sure about every single move, you'll never finish." Valkara pulsed with interest. Trial and error with backtracking. "We've discussed such approaches, but they seemed inelegant, inefficient." "Maybe for a computer," Jiho said. "But for actually solving it? Sometimes the fast way is better than the perfect way." That idea seemed to really shake them up. Jiho could see aliens having intense discussions at various workstations. Some seemed to agree with him. Others looked doubtful. A few seemed almost offended by the suggestion that they shouldn't try. For perfect certainty, Dr. Thalraxis came over during the afternoon, carrying a tray with some kind of blue liquid and a plate of something that might have been fruit. "For you," he said. "I was informed that human children need regular sustenance." "Thanks," Jiho said, though he eyed the food suspiciously. The blue liquid smelled okay. The fruit things looked like they might be sour. He decided to stick with his granola bars for now and just drink the liquid. It tasted like sweet lemonade. "I must ask you something," Thalraxis said. Settling into a seat across from Jiho, several of his eyes watched the boy, while others kept track of the work happening around the room. "How is it that you can see solutions that we cannot? Your brain is younger, less developed. By all our understanding of cognition, you should be at a disadvantage." Jiho thought about that while he chewed on a granola bar. Maybe I'm at an advantage because I don't know all the complicated stuff. Like, you guys know so much about mathematics and dimensions and all that. So when you look at the puzzle, you see all these deep connections and relationships. But I just see a puzzle. I don't overthink it. Ignorance as strength, Falraxis mused. A fascinating paradox. It's not really ignorance, Jeho said. I mean, I don't know as much as you guys, that's true. But I know about patterns. I know about logic. And I've done thousands of puzzles. So I have practice at this specific type of thinking, even if I don't have all the math knowledge. A commotion erupted from Team Alpha's section. Several aliens were gesturing excitedly at their screens. Velkara floated over quickly to see what was happening. We've completed the first dimensional plane, announced an alien that looked like a walking plant. All 144 positions are confirmed. The pattern is stable. The room burst into activity. Other teams rushed to check the work to verify the solution. Jeho watched as numbers and symbols flashed across screens all over the chamber. After about 10 minutes, Velkara turned to address the room. Confirmed, she said, her body glowing bright gold. The first dimensional plane is solved. In 743 years of research, this is the first time we've completed an entire plane with certainty. Cheers erupted. Well, the alien equivalent of cheers. A lot of strange sounds and flashing lights and gestures that Jeho assumed meant they were happy. Dr. Rick's tone brought up a display showing the puzzle. One layer of it was now glowing steady and bright instead of flickering with possibilities. 1/12 of the tessellation was done. At this rate, Rickstone calculated, we could complete the entire puzzle in a matter of weeks. Perhaps even days. Don't get ahead of yourselves, Jeho warned. The first planes are always easier because they have more constraints. The middle sections will be harder. And the last parts will be really tricky because there will be so many possibilities to check. Spoken like someone who has solved many puzzles, Velkara said warmly. By the time 6 o'clock approached, they'd made incredible progress. 2 complete dimensional planes were solved, and a third was nearly finished. The alien scientists were working with an energy and enthusiasm that Falraxis said he'd never seen before in his 300 years at the archives. Jeho packed up his backpack, getting ready to leave. His Aunt Yunji was probably already waiting at the restaurant. Will you return tomorrow? Velkara asked. If you want me to, Jeho said. This is pretty fun. Way better than the boring museum tour I was supposed to do. We very much want you to return, Falraxis said formally. Your contribution to this project has been invaluable. I've been writing reports to send to the Galactic Council. They will want to know that humanity possesses such unique cognitive capabilities. Jeho shrugged, embarrassed. It's just puzzles. Anyone could do this if they practiced. But as he left the chamber, he couldn't help but feel proud. He was helping solve something that had stumped the entire galaxy for hundreds of years. How many kids could say that? Outside, his Aunt Yunji was waiting. She took one look at his face and smiled. Good day? She asked. The best, Jeho said. And he meant it. Part 4. The final push. 3 weeks had passed since Jeho first walked into Chamber 7. What started as a vacation visit had turned into something much bigger. He came to the archives every day now, working with the research teams for hours at a time. His mother had arranged for him to do his regular schoolwork in the evenings. With teachers on Earth sending assignments through video calls, the infinite tessellation had changed dramatically. Where once it had been a constantly shifting mass of uncertain symbols, now large sections glowed with steady light. 9 of the 12-dimensional planes were completely solved. The 10th was nearly finished. Only the 11th and 12th planes remained truly challenging, but Jeho had been right about one thing. The last parts were much harder than the beginning. We're stuck, Dr. Rickstone admitted on the morning of the 21st day. His 3 heads all wore expressions of frustration. These final 2 planes have too many interdependencies. Every choice we make in Plane 11 affects Plane 12 and vice versa. We're chasing our tails? Jiho sat at his usual workstation, staring at the display. He'd been looking at these last two planes for days now. They were tricky, really tricky, the kind of tricky that made his brain hurt if he thought about it too long. Show me the constraint map again, he said. Velkara brought up a visualization that showed how different positions in plane 11 connected to positions in plane 12. It looked like a spider web made of light, with thousands of lines connecting different points. Every line represented a rule or relationship that had to be satisfied. It's beautiful, Jiho murmured. But yeah, I see the problem. It's like a loop. You can't solve this part without knowing that part, but you can't solve that part without knowing this part. Precisely, Velkara said. Her crystal body had been a dim blue for days now, a sign that she was worried. We've been attempting to find an entry point, some position that could be determined independently. But every analysis suggests no such position exists. Jiho pulled out his notebook. It was almost full now, pages and pages of scribbled notes and diagrams. He flipped back through them, looking at the patterns they'd identified over the past weeks. Sometimes when you got stuck on a puzzle, the answer was in something you'd figured out earlier. Wait, he said suddenly. What about the color harmonies? The color harmonies? Dalrexis moved closer. Those are aesthetic constraints, not functional ones. Decree volume included them for beauty, but they don't actually limit the solution space. Are you sure about that? Jiho asked. He was flipping through his notes faster now. Because look, every time we've solved a section, the colors have always formed these patterns. I drew them here, see? It's like a rhythm. Red, blue, green, yellow, then it starts over but shifted. He showed them his notebook. Over the past weeks, whenever he'd gotten bored during the technical discussions, he'd been doodling, drawing out the color patterns he saw in the solved sections. He thought it was just fidgeting, but now he was seeing something else. The colors repeat in cycles, he explained. And the cycles are offset between dimensions. If you follow the pattern, you can predict what colors should appear in the unsolved sections. Versh, the slug-like alien, oozed over to look. We dismissed the aesthetic elements as non-critical. But if there's a mathematical structure underlying them, a pattern that holds across all dimensions, then it's not just aesthetic, Velkara finished. Her body was starting to glow brighter. It's another constraint we failed to recognize. Show us the pattern, Jiho. Jiho spent the next hour explaining what he'd noticed. It wasn't something he could put into equations the way the aliens liked. It was more of a feeling, a sense of how the colors flowed and repeated. But as he talked, the alien scientists started running calculations, testing his observations against the solved sections. It holds, Rickstone announced, his three voices filled with excitement. In every solved position, the color pattern matches Jiho's predicted cycle. And if we extrapolate that to planes 11 and 12, Velkara was already working, her hands moving through holographic displays at incredible speed. We can eliminate entire branches of possibilities. Positions that would otherwise be ambiguous become clear when we apply the color harmony constraint. The room exploded into activity. Every team redirected their focus to incorporating this new understanding. Jiho watched as the web of connections on his screen started to simplify. Lines disappeared as impossible options were eliminated. The tangle started to look less like chaos and more like something they could actually work with. I found an entry point, called out Nera, one of the plant-like aliens. Position Beta 12 Omega in plane 11. With the color constraint, it can only be one of two symbols. And if we test both options, one of them creates an immediate contradiction in plane 12, another researcher finished. Which means we know the answer with certainty. It was like watching a dam break. Once they had that one position, other positions started falling into place. The teams worked with incredible focus, barely stopping to rest. Jiho stayed at his workstation, sometimes offering suggestions, sometimes just watching in amazement as these brilliant aliens put all the pieces together. His mother came by in the evening with dinner. Real Earth food this time, rice and bulgogi from a Korean restaurant that had just opened on the station. Jiho ate quickly, not wanting to miss anything. You know, you don't have to stay here all night, Do-yeon said gently. These scientists can work without you. I know, Jiho said, but I want to see it finished. We're so close, Mom. Maybe just a few more hours. It was more than a few hours. It was all night. Jiho dozed off at his workstation around midnight, his head on his folded arms. When he woke up a few hours later, the work was still going on. Aliens were bringing each other food and drinks. Nobody wanted to leave. By dawn, Plane 11 was complete. The entire chamber seemed to hold its breath as the teams turned their attention to the final plane. Plane 12. The last piece of the puzzle. This one went faster. With 11 planes already solved, the constraints on the 12th were incredibly tight. Each position had only a few possible options and often only one. The teams moved through it methodically, checking and double-checking each placement. Jiho was awake now, fully alert. He watched as section after section of the final plane lit up with steady light. The tessellation was almost complete. Just one corner left. Then one edge. Then a handful of positions. Professor Velkara was handling the final placements herself. Her crystalline body was blazing white, so bright that Jiho had to squint to look at her. Every alien in the room had stopped working, all eyes on the floating puzzle. 3 positions remaining, Velkara announced. Her voice was shaking slightly. 2 positions remaining. 1 position remaining. She reached out with one glowing hand and made a gesture in the air. A symbol appeared in the last empty space in the tessellation. For a moment, nothing happened. The puzzle just floated there. All 12 dimensions now filled with steady glowing symbols. Then it changed. The tessellation began to pulse with light. The symbols started rearranging themselves, moving faster and faster. Jiho heard alarm sounds coming from somewhere in the archives. Not danger alarms, but announcement alarms. Something important was happening. The puzzle collapsed. That was the only way Jiho could describe it. It folded in on itself in ways that hurt to watch, dimensions compressing into dimensions. And then, where the tessellation had been, there was now something new. A sphere of golden light floated in the center of the chamber. Information was pouring out of it, streams of data flowing into the archive's computer systems. Ancient Kree-volume knowledge, finally unlocked after thousands of years, the crystalline barriers that had separated the observation area from the puzzle. Chamber dissolved. Aliens rushed forward, but they stopped short of the golden sphere, just staring at it in wonder. Jiho walked forward slowly. He reached the sphere and stopped, looking up at it. It was beautiful. It pulsed with a warm, welcoming light. We did it, he whispered. Behind him, Professor Velkara was glowing so brightly she looked like a star. We did it, she repeated. 743 years of effort. And in 3 weeks, with the help of a human child? We've solved the greatest mystery in the galaxy. Dr. Thalraxis approached. All 6 of his arms spread wide in what Jiho had learned was a gesture of extreme respect. Young Jiho Kim, you have accomplished what generations of scholars could not. The Kree-volume knowledge is now accessible to all. Medical advances, energy technologies, scientific principles we never imagined, all because you saw what we could not. Jiho felt his face getting hot. He wasn't used to this much attention. I just looked at it like a puzzle, he said quietly. That's all? No, Velkara said firmly. You looked at it like a human. And that made all the difference. The room erupted in celebration. Aliens were making all sorts of sounds and gestures of joy. Some were crying. Some were dancing in ways that defied physics. Some were already poring over the new data flowing from the golden sphere. And in the middle of it all stood Jiho, a 12-year-old boy from Earth who had just changed the galaxy forever, and who couldn't wait to tell his friend Minho all about it. Part 5. Everything changes. The news spread across the galaxy faster than light. Within hours of the tessellation solution, every major news network was broadcasting the story. Within a day, Jiho's face was on screens from Earth to the Outer Rim colonies. The human child who solved the impossible puzzle. The boy who unlocked ancient secrets with logic and Sudoku, Jiho, found it all very overwhelming. He sat in his family's quarters on the diplomatic station, trying to do his homework while his tablet kept buzzing with notifications. Messages from classmates back on Earth, interview requests from journalists, congratulations from people he'd never met. His Aunt Yunji had to help him turn off most of the alerts just so he could concentrate. "This is crazy," Jiho said, staring at his math homework. Regular math seemed boring now compared to 12-dimensional puzzles. "I just solved a puzzle." "Why is everyone making such a big deal about it?" His mother sat down next to him. "Because it wasn't just a puzzle, Jiho. It was a test that the greatest minds in the galaxy had failed for centuries. And you solved it by thinking differently than everyone else. That's important. It shows that humans have something valuable to contribute to the galactic community." "I guess," Jiho said. He understood it intellectually, but it still felt weird. He was just a kid who liked puzzles. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Ambassador Do-yeon had to attend, and she brought Jiho with her. The council chamber was huge, with seats arranged in a circle that rose up like a stadium. Representatives from hundreds of different species sat in their designated areas, all of them turning to look when Jiho walked in. The session was long and boring. Lots of aliens gave speeches about the importance of the tessellation solution. They talked about the new technologies they were discovering in the Kree-volume data. Medical treatments that could save billions of lives. Energy systems that were clean and efficient. Scientific theories that would revolutionize their understanding of the universe. Then they talked about Earth, about humanity, about the educational methods that had produced a child capable of such insights. "We must study the human approach to problem-solving," declared Counselor Vrextel, an important leader from one of the oldest civilizations. "Their methods clearly have value that we have overlooked." "I propose we establish educational exchanges," suggested another counselor. "Human teachers could share their techniques with our schools. In return, we offer our advanced knowledge to Earth's institutions." Back and forth the discussion went. Jiho tried to pay attention, but his mind kept wandering. He was thinking about something Dr. Thalraxis had mentioned earlier. Another unsolved mystery in the archives. Something called the Eternal Labyrinth. It was supposed to be even harder than the tessellation. Finally, they called Jiho to the center of the chamber to receive a formal recognition. He walked down the steps, feeling very small in this massive room full of important aliens. Counselor Vrextel presented him with a crystal device that showed different patterns when you looked at it from different angles. "Jiho Kim of Earth," Vrextel said formally, "you have demonstrated that wisdom and insight are not limited by age or experience. You have shown us that sometimes the simplest approach is the most powerful. On behalf of the Galactic Council, we thank you and honor you." Everyone in the chamber made their species-specific gestures of approval. Jiho bowed the way his mother had taught him and returned to his seat. His face was burning. He'd never been in front of this many people before. Even if most of them weren't technically people in the human sense, the following weeks were strange. Jiho tried to return to his normal routine, but normal didn't really exist anymore. When he went to the archives to visit his friends there, tourists would recognize him and ask for photos. When his mom took him to restaurants, staff would give them free food. When he logged into his classes back on Earth, his teachers treated him differently, like he was some kind of genius instead of just a regular student. Professor Velkara became his regular contact at the archives. She would send him interesting problems to think about, not expecting solutions but just curious about his perspective. Dr. Rickstone sent him a puzzle book from his homeworld. Though Jiho couldn't read the language and needed a translator app to work through it. Miss Jing, his teacher back on Earth, messaged him with exciting news. "Jiho, you won't believe this. I've been contacted by educators from 7 different alien species. They want to learn about how we teach logic puzzles to children. Your success has everyone curious about Earth's educational methods. That's good, right?" Jiho replied. "It's incredible," Miss Haijin wrote back. "This could change how children learn all across the galaxy. And it started because you like doing puzzles on the train." On Earth, the puzzle book company that made Jiho's favorite Sudoku collections found themselves suddenly famous. Their sales went through the roof as aliens and humans alike wanted to try these human cognitive training tools. The company sent Jiho a huge box of free puzzle books as thanks, which made him happier than any medal or award. His friend Minho video called him almost every day. Dude, you're famous. Like galaxy famous. Kids at school won't stop asking me about you. They want to know if you were always this smart or if you got superpowers from the aliens or something. Jiho laughed. No superpowers. Just puzzles. Are you still doing the weekly challenge books? Yeah, but they seem way easier now. I keep thinking about what you said in that interview, about starting with the certain answers and building from there. It really works. Of course it works, Jiho said. That's just how you solve puzzles. But apparently it wasn't how everyone solved puzzles. And that was the strange thing Jiho was learning. What seemed obvious to him wasn't obvious to everyone else. His way of thinking, shaped by years of doing Sudoku and logic games and riddles, was actually special, unique, valuable. 3 months after solving the tessellation, the Galactic Archives held a formal ceremony. Thousands of aliens attended, both in person and through holographic transmission. Dr. Thalraxis gave a long speech about the history of the tessellation and the importance of its solution. Professor Velkara talked about how Jiho's methods had influenced her own research. Then they unveiled something new, a statue in the archive's main hall. It showed a human child, cast in the same golden light that had come from the solved tessellation, holding up a grid of symbols. Under it, in dozens of languages including Korean and English, was an inscription. Jiho Kim, who taught us that wisdom wears many faces, and that sometimes the youngest voice speaks the greatest truth. Jiho stood in front of the statue with his mother, his Aunt Yoonji, and several of the scientists he'd worked with. He felt emotional in a way he couldn't quite explain. He was just a kid, just someone who liked puzzles. But somehow that had been enough to change things. Later, at a smaller gathering, Velkara approached him. I have something to ask you, Jiho. A favor, if you're willing. What is it? The Eternal Labyrinth, she said. We've been studying it for 1,000 years without success. After seeing what you did with the tessellation, I wonder if you might bring your unique perspective to that challenge as well. Jiho felt a spark of excitement. He'd been curious about the labyrinth ever since Thalraxis had mentioned it. What kind of puzzle is it? It's a multi-dimensional maze, but it's unlike any maze you've encountered. The paths shift based on decisions you make. It's part puzzle, part game, part logic problem. So like a really complex maze puzzle, Jiho said. I've done those before. There are strategy books about them. Velkara's body pulsed with amused light. Of course there are. Of course humans have strategy books for maze puzzles. Will you try? Thalraxis asked. No pressure, of course. You've already given us more than we could have hoped for. But if you're interested... Jiho looked at his mother, who smiled and nodded. Then he looked back at the scientists, these brilliant aliens who had become his friends over the past months. Yeah, he said. I'll try. But I need to finish this school semester first. And I promised Minho we'd work through the new expert-level puzzle book together. So maybe in a few weeks? Whenever you're ready, Velkara said warmly. The labyrinth has waited 1,000 years. It can wait a bit longer. That night, back in their quarters, Jiho sat with his tablet, composing a message to his classmates back on Earth. They'd asked him to talk to them about his experience, what it was like being famous, solving an impossible puzzle. Meeting all these aliens, he thought about what to say, how to explain something so big and strange and wonderful. Finally, he wrote, It's been really cool but also kind of weird. Everyone keeps calling me a genius, but I don't feel like one. I just did what I always do with puzzles. Look for patterns, eliminate the wrong answers, keep trying until it works. The only difference is that this puzzle was bigger and more important than the ones in my books. But the process was the same. So, I guess what I'm saying is, anyone could have done it if they thought about it the right way. I just happened to be the one who tried. Also, alien food is weird, but some of it is actually pretty good. See you all when I get back to Earth. He sent the message and closed his tablet. Through the window of their quarters,